As worshippers mourn the loss of Pope Francis across the globe, we're learning more today on his historic journey as pontiff, which included a trip to Canada and an apology to residential school victims. Here to discuss is Brian Caruana, Executive Director of the Encounter World Religions Center. Brian, thank you so much for being with us today. Quite a somber day here, but let's start with that trip to Canada. How historic was it and what impact does it have?
Yeah, it was really unprecedented for a pope to come and do the sorts of things he did to make that kind of apology. And many residential school survivors and leaders in Indigenous communities noted that it was the sort of thing that they'd waited for in some cases for their whole life. So it was really significant event.
That is going to be part of the Pope's legacy too. I want to talk a little bit about how you think Francis will be remembered. We've heard so far words like compassionate and especially the word humble has been used time and time again.
Yeah, he's going to be very memorable. He is the first pope outside of Europe in many centuries. He is the first pope from South America. He grew up in Argentina. And growing up in Argentina, he witnessed, especially in the time he grew up, a lot of poverty and strife and war. And he was therefore very connected to sort of the need for the church to address those things. He said the church should be a field hospital. A field hospital, of course, is something that is in the middle of the struggle and trying to address those who are in the most pain. And he did this as an archbishop. He wouldn't live in palatial residences. He had simple, modest housing. He took public transport. He knew homeless people by their first names. And he tried to bring all of this to the papacy.
And we even take into consideration how he spent his final day, his final few hours serving the people, including providing Easter blessings, special prayers on Sunday here. When you look at other popes throughout history, how do you think Francis stands out?
This emphasis on compassion is really going to mark him. He did a whole bunch of things. His first trip outside of Rome after he became pope was he went to Lampedusa. Lampedusa is a small island in the Mediterranean where refugees from Africa first land in their attempt to get to Europe. And he spoke immediately about the need to look after migrants and refugees. He struggled to have success on that front. He criticized President Trump's policies on that front, but it was immediately this aspect of compassion. In Rome, too, closer to home, he set up facilities for homeless people. He set up showers in the Vatican and shelters and medical services and even barber services. There was just a real compassion about him. He was somebody who grew up amongst ordinary people, and he never lost that. And I think that's going to be a large part of his legacy.
And what about the impacts? What impacts do you think he'll have on the papacy, the church, and the Vatican going forward?
That is a very good question. And a big part of it is going to be who succeeds him. There are some potential successors who will carry on his legacy and his vision, but he was liberal in some ways, and there's some more conservative potential contenders who, if they take over, will probably turn away from some of his moves. Some of your listeners will famously remember when he said about gays, "Who am I to judge?" He often didn't change major doctrines. For example, he didn't bless same-sex marriages, but he softened all those culture war issues. He gave priests the right to nonetheless bless the couple. He elevated women in the church without yet having women as priests. So a lot of those shifts, I don't know, whether they survive or not, depend a lot on who his successor is. But I think that compassionate aspect will carry on, whether you're liberal or conservative. There was a certain humbling that he brought to the institution, to the church. He brought a heart to it, and I think that will carry on.
I think a lot of people talk about how he just brought the whole world together. You don't have to be a follower of the church, but just the fact that he brought so many people together. Last question for you, Brian. As the process gets underway to select the next pope here, what sort of factors are considered?
Yeah, they'll be looking at a number of factors. One is the direction that the Pope would take. As I mentioned, there is always kind of a liberal and conservative divide in those conclaves that happen. Another is sort of representation. What part of the world is the Pope from? I mentioned that this Pope was the first non-European Pope in the modern era, but the next Pope could easily be from Asia, from Africa, potentially even from the United States. So both geography, but in particular, what direction would this new Pope bring us, and is this what the Church needs at the moment? And I think that distinction between the liberal and conservatives is going to be the most telling.
All right, we'll leave it at that. That is Brian Caruana, Executive Director of the Encounter World Religions Center. Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you.